It's episode 2 of The Amiga Show. Coming up, we look at December 1985 through the eyes of Amiga World. We play what some consider to be the first commercially published game for the system. As it's Christmas, we settle down to a brand new game. And we take a look at TextCraft, the first word processor for the Amiga. Yes, word processor. Let's take a look at the second issue of Amiga's fledgling magazine. It must have been a difficult issue to write, publishing timelines meaning the December issue was written in October, just as the first machines and software were supposed to be arriving, albeit in small quantities. It opens with an article about the Amiga's launch, which we covered in episode 1. Lots of folk enjoying the hospitality here, as well as demos of the machine. Oh dear. The magazine at first glance is questioning its existence. What will our future hold? What will this magazine be about? Questions being asked by early adopters and dealers alike. This issue is themed on business. You must surely have bought your 1000 for business. There follows an article about what software you might need to run a business, and cleverly manages to do this without mentioning any software at all. At this point, there really wasn't any. Here's a businessman on the phone to his dealer. Probably not his stock dealer, but his computer dealer. Probably asking where all the software is. There's an article about the new machine and why your investment or potential investment was worth it in the long run. It makes good points about the superior hardware. Open architecture will allow for future expansion of the Amiga, but then goes on to say, if you don't buy an Amiga, you might as well buy stock in Commodore. Yeah, I would stick to computer and not financial advice in this instance. This magazine was clearly focused on those thinking about buying a new Amiga. There's a comparison article about the competition. Notice the Atari ST's absence. This was not viewed as a competitor by Commodore at this point. There are more columns about the Amiga's superiority and future-proofing. This was true as long as you'd bought the optional 256K RAM expansion. I can just imagine the art department saying, "Oh, I thought you said draw an amoeba." The software may have been in short supply, but the artwork by Commodore's in-house team mercifully kept flowing. Here is a selection of art by pioneering artist Cheryl Knowles, the Amiga's first artist. Much of this artwork appearing in manuals for Commodore's launch products, including TextCraft, but more on that later. Let's see how some other press saw the launch. Compute Gazette from Canada had concerns. It hadn't received a unit yet and cast doubts on the Christmas period. The introduction raises the spectre of Tramiel's past. If the ST and Amiga weren't competitors, nobody told Byte magazine. They were aching to do a comparison, but would have to wait until March '86 before they could publish that, due to a lack of Amiga hardware. Although it trumpeted the Amiga's custom chips, it asks, who wants a business machine in colour? Imagine. Adding that the Mac should not bring out a colour model. Oh well, it's easy to look back and judge. Still, we have these amazing ads to look at. Great stuff. InfoWorld was equally ignorant to the lack of competition from Atari, asking which you'd prefer to see stuffed in your stocking. Speaking to Broderbund, we'd love to do an Amiga version of Fantavision, but we don't know if we dare. Imagine that. Oh. Let's take another look at Cheryl Knowles' Amiga artwork as we wander around the gallery. In trying to create the Amiga show, I wanted most, if not all of it, to be made on an Amiga. But there is one bit that bothered me. I wrote the script on a Mac or a PC, basically whatever was to hand. The question is, can I write the script on an Amiga? Let's find out. Well, of course, the answer is yes. The Amiga has a number of excellent word processors. The question really is, can I use the very first word processor made for the Amiga? With the launch of the machine, Commodore needed software to be available from word go. One problem being they had no operating system. At the last minute, Tripos was purchased from Metacomco, an OS designed by British research students at Cambridge University and implemented at amazing speed.
What's the Metacomco connection then?
Well, when I got hold of this machine first, it didn't have an operating system. The people who were meant to do it blew it away. Tim King was brought in, I would say, as an emergency.
Well, Tim, as an emergency saver of the situation, you've come up with something which I gather is fairly impressive. How long did you have to develop the operating system?
Well, we've had about 6 months in total, but we brought out a first production development system in about a month.
That is motoring, isn't it? That's going somewhere.
With some late nights.
Without that, we wouldn't have the machine today.
Right, now...
Much of the software developed had been outsourced to third-party developers, one of which was Arctronics, who made this, Textcraft. Now, before we take a look at the program and all the effort required in running it on a new machine, let's take a look at the manual. Viewers of episode 1 will recognise the style of the manual immediately. These early software titles were part of a set and were designed to fit in a ring-bound folder. You may also recognise some of Cheryl Knowles' artwork from before. This gives what could potentially be quite a dry read into something that gives a sense of creative possibility. The manual is very straightforward and easy to read. It needed to be. This was partly designed for people who were not used to computers at all. The layout of the user interface is very simple, using large icons that were a world away from WordStar and gives a closer nod to MacWrite. It is very simple to navigate. The only thing to note is that the selection of these icons is by the right mouse button, something a bit alien to modern applications and muscle memory. But help is at hand. The program came with a series of animated tutorials, so let's take a look. There are a number of them here, even one about the tutorials themselves. The fun part is watching the mouse pointer being taken over by the machine and watching text being typed by the Amiga. All very innovative stuff, in a moderately spooky way. Great to see this much thought gone into a product aimed at novices, although it is easy to see why it wasn't taken seriously by the business sector. What's nice is that when you return from the tutorial, your document is restored to the screen. There are also a number of document templates to choose from. These prepare headings and so on, although there is no database to pull this information from. Here I am sending a memo to Doug and Vicky about the 2021 Amiga Art Contest. No pressure, of course. So it's quite a basic word processor with some nice touches. It's interesting how you define your style before selecting text, which actually makes quite a bit of sense. Copy and paste and cut and paste are a little unfamiliar in practice, but easy to get used to after a while. Textcraft took me a while to get up and running on an AGA machine. It does not like modern RAM expansions. Disabling this as well as latter chipsets is a must, as well as the CPU cache. Even then, it's not an easy ride, almost certainly expecting an early kickstart. In fact, when you know what you're doing, it's easy to make it crash on demand. Like that. So, is it possible to use this as a word processor for modern use? Well, of course, it's entirely possible, but not necessarily recommended, although I am tempted to keep trying to write more of these scripts on the Amiga. Let's see how it goes. I just need to remember to save more. This is Monkey Business by Other Valley Software. Yes, the game many believe to be the first commercially published title for the Amiga. Now, I am a little sceptical about this, but the work gone into restoring it from obscurity is in no doubt. This EAB forum post is well worth reading through. Some great work done here. So here it is, Monkey Business. And basically, it's a Donkey Kong clone. Except this time you play as a tax collector, Kong being replaced by a bodyguard as you try to reach the boss of the company whilst picking up bonus receipts. This is all very familiar stuff and frankly a bit underwhelming. The game was ported from an Apple II and certainly looks and sounds that way. 3 levels are here. Which loop? I only managed a few loops, so there may be more here, but I doubt it. What I would say though is it actually plays okay. In fact, I played this for a while and quite enjoyed it. In my opinion, the jump mechanic is vastly improved over the arcade version, making it much easier to progress. Ladders are less of a problem, obstacles are more easily navigated, maybe a little too easy, helped by these repellent sprays. However, you can fall into the old trap of being too greedy. So, it's not a great game then, hardly making much use of the Amiga's potential, especially considering it required a 512K system. Yes, this needed an expanded machine. But in itself, it plays quite well and worth checking out for the folklore, if nothing else. This was followed up a few months later by Delta Patrol. Yes, you guessed it, it's a Defender clone. This one feels a bit more confident than Monkey Business. Okay, it's no great shakes. The screen couldn't be any smaller if it tried. And the map, whilst essential for not smashing into oncoming enemies, as I'm doing here, depicts a terrain absent from the game. Still, it features mouse or trackball support, which actually works quite well. This was another early game for the Amiga, turning up in late '85. When it appeared, it was shrouded in mystery. A game with no instructions. On opening up the LP record-style box, we get a disc and a couple of items, one of which is the instructions on how to load the game. As it says, we'll tell you how to load it, the rest is up to you. In this version, there's also a small catalogue, which is quite nice to see. Some upcoming games here. Borrowed Time looking like a template for many point-and-click adventures to come. Maybe we'll cover that one day. The design is just great on these things. Interestingly enough, the disc label seems to be suffering from Actoplaque, the condition which befalls many Activision cartridges for the Atari. It is worth pointing out that the following is one massive spoiler. I would move on if you want to play this for yourself. That said, let's hook up our modem and see who we can freak. This is the start and is genuinely my first playthrough at this point. The designer wanted to give the player the experience of hacking, and at first, it is quite puzzling what to do. Ignorant of any login details, the game takes control. It's worth pointing out that from here on, anything on screen may be information we need later, so pen and paper is a must. Embarrassingly, this section where you need to identify 5 parts of the robot took me about 20 minutes, so I'll spare you that. We're then brought to what is our main game screen. and we were asked our name and time zone. So the game's theme is about world domination through magma. I couldn't afford a copyright strike on the Austin Powers clip, but I imagine the prize is not $1 million. At this point, I was just getting used to the interface. There's a series of adventure-like buttons on the left, and we can control our SRU on the right. I eventually worked out how to control its tank-like movement, so off we go. This is a maze, but we can see possible directions via our icon below. We get messages from Magma, the company we have broken into, telling us that there are fragments of a secret message which we need to obtain from agents around the world before falling into the hands of the authorities. Some agents want different things for this information, and that is basically the game. One of the game's challenges is that some agents are not fussy with what they trade, whilst others are. Heading up to our first open-air meeting, it is dark. Calling an agent did nothing, so I switch on the infrared camera. We seem to be in the Swiss Alps, but still no agent, so I'll call again. Here is our very not suspicious at all agent who wants to trade for a piece of the document. All we have is money at this point, and so eventually I worked out how to trade, and we got our first piece. We then offered some items in the most brilliantly poor French possible, almost as good as mine. Voudrez-vous acheter the deed to a Swiss chalet? Oui? Non? Anyway, we take both, and whilst we try to freak out our agent, we head back down. Moving on to Greece, we find what looks like a member of the village people. I try to exchange items for a piece of the message, but nothing interests him. Getting yourself clean and having a good meal weren't in my inventory. As the game progresses, aspects of the interface change. We lose our ability to see possible directions. Satellites are made aware of our intrusion. In latter stages, even our icon is removed from the display, relying on our ability to count the beeps to work out where we have travelled. My advice is to map the game as soon as possible. This is essential. This is the very map I drew. I know. Yeah, if anyone has been affected by this, there will be a helpline at the end of the episode. More expertly drawn are the satellites, giving a nice shiny glint as they rotate. Very nice. However, you'll be trying to avoid them, as an encounter will lead to questions. Get anything wrong, and you'll be booted off the network. Here, I got the answer correct, but it wasn't formatted correctly. Oh well, lesson learned. Anyway, you travel the world, getting bits of the message, but eventually I got stuck. Either I gave the wrong item to a previous agent, or just ran out of time. Yes, the game counts your mouse clicks, so be very sparing. Time is limited. In order to finish the game for the episode, I cheated. I know. I eventually followed a walkthrough. Although this was no easy task and took a number of goes, the game's strict time requirements making this a challenge even with a solution, which in itself had omissions, so was fun to troubleshoot. Now I am going to spoil the ending. You have been warned. Move on a couple of minutes if you want to save it for a surprise. However, it is great. On completing the game, collecting all the message fragments and returning them to Washington, you are rewarded with a customised front page of a newspaper. If you have an Epson-compatible printer handy, it will actually print it out. It's very cool to see how your name is incorporated into the story. And yes, this is a genuine Amiga printout on a modern printer. If you want to know more about achieving this piece of magic, I'll be covering it in next month's episode. This is Whiz by Mutation Software. Adrian Cummings has returned to the AJ Amiga in great form with his new Christmas present to the Amiga community. Set across 5 platforming levels, you must retrieve a magic lantern stolen by the Wicked Witch, Wartnose. Now, as we start, here's our character with his comedy bouncing hat. You're able to fire a short-range spell with your wand, but you can also perform bigger spells by pulling down the joystick to select the one you want. There's a fairy which acts as a satellite to help destroy enemies, a healing spell, a bubble which allows a small amount of free movement over a limited time, useful for getting hard-to-reach bonuses. Freeze freezes all enemies until the time runs out. Carefully timed to be just not quite enough in my experience. And you can rain down fire, useful in conjunction with freeze. Now as the game starts, you are pitted against what becomes one of the most feared enemies in the game, the worm. Now, me and the worm have come to blows on more than one occasion, usually resulting in Whiz's death. At one point I can imagine the end of game boss being nothing more than an empty room and a single solitary worm crawling towards you. There cannot have been a more challenging battle in gaming history since Cloud defeated Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII. Okay, that may be overplaying it a bit, but the pixel precision required to dispatch the worm is tricky. To add to your problems, the worm's roll passes on to a crab and then to a mutating green blob. The graphics, however, are great, a real pleasure to play through. The backgrounds in particular have a faded Victorian feel and get progressively darker in tone as the theme of the game moves on, all really nice. The levels, as you can see, are varied and well done. There are occasional leaps of faith, but many are rewarded, although in one level in particular, some do feel unkind. As are the boss battles. Now, I'm not a huge fan of boss encounters in any game. I find them very stressful. In these battles, the bosses seem to stay mostly out of screen, making just tracking them down difficult. Use of the freeze spell being essential. Even then, attacking their weak spot can be a tall order. However, I really enjoyed this one. It's such a pleasure to play a new, slick platform game for the system. Niggles aside, this one comes highly recommended. I was quick enough to get the disc version, but newer releases have a USB key and disc labels, so you can roll your own. Now, from a technical point of view, the game mostly runs at a smooth 50 frames a second, although if you have an accelerator card, you will need to disable this. I had trouble at first with some very laggy slowdown. Disabling fast RAM corrected this. I also had issues with the menu, but this is almost certainly down to the board still being installed. However, I was able to work around this. The README does mention that the game is for a stock 1200. However, on a plus side, it is hard drive installable. I'm running this from my CF card, and after following the instructions, it played without a hitch. So I would definitely recommend this one. It's great to see Mutation Software publishing games of such quality on the Amiga again. And that is it for this episode. Any thoughts about the games featured, or any memories about the Amiga, you can get in contact and let me know. By email, that's mail@theamigashow.com, or Twitter, or see progress via the show's Instagram account. Thanks for watching, see you soon.